Okay, we are picking back up here with part two. So I was testing some things while I was doing the first part. So now we're live with part two. This is a short story that is in the public domain by O. Henry, and this is the Reformation of Calliope. At this point so far, what we have seen is just the setup. So it's a Western story. So we're in the Old West, the Wild West. Calliope in this little town is a terror and known as a terror. He apparently is ornery and he likes to get drunk and come into town shooting everything up and causing problems. And he has just done that. The town is quicksand. He's just come into quicksand and caused problems again. And at this point, people avoid him. So they have already, many of them, just taken off, right? So he is there shooting up an empty town for the most part. And that's where we are picking up. But some four squares farther down, lively preparations were being made to minister to Mr. Catesby's love for interchange of compliments and repartee. On the previous night, numerous messengers had hastened to advise Buck Patterson, the city marshal, of Calliope's impending eruption. The patience of that official, often strained in extending leniency toward the disturber's misdeeds, had been overtaxed. In quicksand, some indulgence was accorded the natural ebullition of human nature, providing that the lives of the more useful citizens were not recklessly squandered or too much property needlessly laid in waste. The community sentiment was again a too strict enforcement of the law. But Calliope had raised the limit. His outbursts had been too frequent and too violent to come within the classification of a normal and sanitary relaxation of spirit. Buck Patterson had been expecting and awaiting in his little 10 by 12 frame office that preliminary yell announcing that Calliope was feeling blue. When the signal came, the city marshal rose to his feet and buckled on his guns. Two deputy sheriffs and three citizens who had proven the edible qualities of fire also stood up, ready to bandy with Calliope's leaden jocularities. "Gather that fella in," said Buck Patterson, setting for the lines of the campaign. "Don't have no talk, but shoot as soon as you can get a show. Keep behind cover. Bring him down. He's a no good un. It's up to Calliope to turn up his toes this time, I reckon. Go to him all spraddled out, boys, and don't get too reckless. For what Calliope shoots at, he hits." Buck Patterson, tall, muscular, and solemn-faced, with his bright city marshal badge shining on the breast of his blue flannel shirt, gave his posse directions for the onslaught upon Calliope. The plan was to accomplish the downfall of the quicksand terror without loss to the attacking party, if possible. The splenetic Calliope, unconscious of retributive, was streaming down the channel, cannonading on either side, when he suddenly became aware of breakers ahead. The city marshal and one of the deputies rose up behind some dry goods boxes, half a square to the front, and opened fire. At the same time, the rest of the posse, divided, shelled him from two side streets up, which they were cautiously maneuvering from a well-executed detour. The first volley broke the lock of one of Calliope's guns, cut a neat underbite in his right ear, and exploded a cartridge in his crossbelt, scorching his ribs as it burst. Feeling braced up by this unexpected tonic to his spiritual depression, Calliope executed a fortissimo note from his upper register and returned the fire like an echo. The upholders of the law dodged at his flash, but a trifle too late to save one of the deputies a bullet just above the elbow, and the marshal a bleeding cheek from a splinter that a ball tore from the box he had ducked behind. And now Calliope met the enemy's tactics in kind. Choosing with a rapid eye the street from which the weakest and least accurate fire had come, he invaded it at a double quick, abandoning the unprotected middle of the street. With a rare cunning, the opposing force in that direction, one of the deputies and two of the valorous volunteers, waited, concealed by beer barrels, until Calliope had passed their retreat, and then peppered him from the rear. In another moment, they were reinforced by the marshal and his other men. And then Calliope felt that in order to successfully prolong the delights of the controversy, he must find some means of reducing the great odds against him. His eye fell upon a structure that seemed to hold out this promise, providing he could reach it. Not far away was the little railroad station, its building a strong box house 10 by 20 feet, resting upon a platform 4 feet above ground. Windows were in each of its walls. Something like a fort, it might become to a man thus sorely pressed by superior numbers. Calliope made a bold and rapid spurt for it, the marshal's crowd smoking him as he ran. He reached the haven in safety, the station agent leaving the building by a window like a flying squirrel as the garrison entered the door. Patterson and his supporters halted under protection of a pile of lumber and held consultations. In the station was an unterrified desperado who was an excellent shot and carried an abundance of ammunition. For 30 yards on each side of the besieged was a stretch of bare open ground. It was a sure thing that the man who attempted to enter that unprotected area would be stopped by one of Calliope's bullets. The city marshal was resolved. He had decided that Calliope Catesby should no more wake the echoes of quicksand with his strident whoop. He had so announced. Officially and personally, he felt imperatively bound to put the soft pedal on that instrument of discord. It played bad tunes. Standing near was a hand truck used in the manipulation of small freight. It stood by a shed full of sacked wool, a consignment from one of the sheep ranches. On this truck, the marshal and his men piled 3 heavy sacks of wool. Stooping low, Buck Patterson started for Calliope's fort, slowly pushing this loaded truck before him for protection. The posse, scattering broadly, stood ready to nip the besieged in case he should show himself in an effort to repel the juggernaut of justice that was creeping upon him. Only once did Calliope make demonstration. He fired from a window, and some tufts of wool spurted from the marshal's trustworthy bulwark. The return shots from the posse pattered against the window frame of the fort. No loss resulted on either side. The marshal was too deeply engrossed in steering his protected battleship to be aware of the approach of the morning train until he was within a few feet of the platform. The train was coming up on the other side of it. It stopped only 1 minute at Quicksand. What an opportunity it would offer to Calliope! He had only to step out the other door, mount the train, and away. Abandoning his breastworks, Buck, with his gun ready, dashed up the steps and into the room, driving open the closed door with one heave of his weighty shoulder. The members of the posse heard one shot fired inside, and then there was silence. At length, the wounded man opened his eyes. After a blank space, he again could see and hear and feel and think. Turning his eyes about, he found himself lying on a wooden bench. A tall man with a perplexed countenance, wearing a big badge with City Marshal engraved upon it, stood over him. A little old woman in black, with a wrinkled face and sparkling black eyes, was holding a wet handkerchief against one of his temples. He was trying to get these facts fixed in his mind and connected with past events when the old woman began to talk. There now, great big strong man. That bullet never touched you. Just skeeted along the side of your head and sort of paralyzed you for a spell. I've heard of such things before, concussion, what they names it. Abel Watkins used to kill squirrels that way. Barking them, Abe called it. You just been barked, sir. You be all right in a little bit. Feel lots better already, don't you? You just lay still a while longer, let me bathe your head. You don't know me, I reckon. Tain't surprising you shouldn't. I come in on that train from Alabama to see my son. Big son, ain't he? Lance. You wouldn't hardly think he'd ever been a baby, would you? This my son, sir. Half turning, the old woman looked up at the standing man, her worn face lighting with a proud and wonderful smile. She reached out one veined and calloused hand and took one of her son's. Then, smiling cheerily down at the prostrate man, she continued to dip the handkerchief in the waiting room in wash basin and gently apply it to his temple. She had the benevolent garrulity of old age. I ain't seen my son before, she continued. In 8 years. One of my nephews, Elkanah Prince. He's a conductor on one of them railroads. He got me a pass to come out here. I could stay a whole week on it. Then it'll take me back again. Just think now, that little boy of mine's got to be an officer, city marshal of a whole town. That's something like a constable, ain't it? I never knowed he was an officer. He didn't say nothing about it in his letters. I reckon he thought his old mother'd be scared about the danger he's in. But laws, I never was much a hand to get scared. Tain't no use. I heard them guns a shooting while I was getting off them cars. I see smoke coming out the depot, but I just walked right along. Then I see son's face looking out through the window. I knowed him one set. He met me at the door and squeezed me most to death. There you was, sir, a lying there just like you was dead. And I allowed we see what might be done to help set you up. I think I'll sit up now, said the concussion patient. I'm feeling pretty fair by this time. He sat somewhat weakly yet, leaning against the wall. He was a rugged man, big-boned and straight. His eyes, steady and keen, seemed to linger upon the face of the man standing so still above him. His look wandered often from the face he studied to the marshal's badge upon the other's breast. Yes, yes, you'll be all right, said the old woman, patting his arm. If you don't get to cutting up again and having folks shooting at you. Son told me about you, sir, while he's laying senseless on the floor. Don't you take it as meddlesome for an old woman with a son as big as you to talk about it. And you mustn't hold no grudge against my son for having to shoot at you.
An officer's got to take up for the law. It's his duty. And them that acts bad and lives wrong has to suffer. Don't blame my son any, sir. 'Tain't his fault. He always been a good boy. Good when he's grown up, kind and obedient, well behaved. Won't you let me advise you, sir, not to do so no more? Be a good man. Leave liquor alone. Live peaceably and godly. Keep away from bad company. Work honest and sleep sweet. The black mittened hand of the old pleader gently touched the breast of the man she addressed. Very earnest and candid, her old worn face looked. In her rusty black dress and antique bonnet, she sat near the close of a long life and epitomized the experience of the world. Still, the man to whom she spoke gazed above her head, contemplating the silent son of the old mother. "What does the marshal say?" he asked. "Does he believe the advice is good? Suppose the marshal speaks up and says if the talk's all right." The tall man moved uneasily. He fingered the badge on his breast for a moment, then he put an arm around the old woman and drew her close to him. She smiled the unchanging mother smile of 80 years and patted his big brown hand with her crooked mittened fingers while her son spoke. "I says this," he said, looking squarely into the eyes of the other man, "that if I was in your place, I'd follow it. If I was a drunken, desperate character without shame or hope, I'd follow it. If I was in your place and you was in mine, I'd say, Marshal, I'm willing to swear. If you give me the chance, I'll quit the racket. I'll drop the tanglefoot and the gunplay and won't play hoss no more. I'll be a good citizen and go to work and quit my foolishness. So God help me, that's what I'd say to you if you was Marshal and I was in your place." "Hear my son talking," said the old woman softly. "Hear him, sir. You promised to be good. He won't do you no harm. 41 year ago, his heart first beat again mine. Is beat true ever since." The other man rose to his feet, trying his limbs and stretching his muscles. "Then," said he, "if you's in my place and said that, and I was Marshal, I'd say go free and do your best to keep your promise." "Lawsy," said the old woman in a sudden flutter. "If I didn't clear forget that trunk of mine, I see a man sitting on a platform just as I seen son's face in the window, and it went plumb out my head. There's 8 jars of homemade quince jam in that trunk that I made myself. I wouldn't have nothing happen to them jars for a red apple." Away to the door she trotted, spry and anxious, and then Calliope Catesby spoke out to Buck Patterson. "I just couldn't help it, Buck. I seen her through the window coming in. She never had heard a word about my tough ways. I didn't have the nerve to let her know I was a worthless cuss being hunted down by the community. There you's lying where my shot laid you, like you's dead. The idea struck me sudden, and I just took your badge off and fastened it onto myself, and I fastened my reputation onto you. I told her I was the marshal. You was a holy terror. You can take your badge back now, Buck." With shaking fingers, Calliope began to unfasten the disc of metal from his shirt. "Easy there," said Buck Patterson. "You keep that badge right where it is, Calliope Catesby. Don't you dare take it off till the day your mother leave this town. You be city marshal of Quicksand long as she's here to know it. After her, I stir around town a bit and put 'em on. I'll guarantee that nobody won't give the thing away to her. And say, you leather-headed, rip-roaring, low-down son of a loco coyote, you follow that advice she give me. I'm going to take some of it myself, too. Buck, said Calliope feelingly, if I don't, I hope I may. Shut up, said Buck. She's a coming back. All right, so that is the tale of the Reformation of Calliope, and it's that is a classic O. Henry story. In that O. Henry's short stories were known for their twist endings. So that's our twist ending there, of course, at the end is that while we thought we were listening to a Calliope who had nearly been killed by Buck Patterson, that in fact Buck had nearly been killed. But Calliope, with his mother coming into town there, switched some things around there. But he did all right. Yeah. So interesting. And then that's part of his Reformation, right? And I think the real thing that's nice there is that his Reformation is partly about his mother, right? And the idea that he wants to honor his mother, doesn't want her to know about the things that he's done. And the other part of it is empathy and human kindness, right? Seeing the human being in a guy who's not a good guy, who shoots up the town and causes all kinds of problems, specifically for Buck, as well as others. And yet, Buck still sees the potential for that reformation, for that change of character, and he does give him that opportunity. So it's good. That's a pretty good little story. I like it. So I hope that you liked it as well. And yeah, we will look to read something else here very soon. I don't know what. Maybe another Western, because I have a couple of books on order from another library that are coming in to the one near me. But in the meantime, I have this collection of Western short stories, which are, I think, almost all, if not all, in the public domain. I'll have to check some of the other ones. I know there's a Jack London tale in there that I have not read, so maybe we'll see what that's about. And then I have some Edgar Allan Poe coming in, so some wonderful, wonderful stories by Poe, and many of you, I suspect, have heard several of them: The Telltale Heart, and The Pit and the Pendulum, and many others, Cask of Amontillado, and etc. But there are many, many others that you may not have heard of. Poe was a fairly prolific writer, right? So there are a number of them, and some of them are quite good, that are just not as well known or as well read. So we'll take a look. We'll see as we go along. I'm not sure if I want to read them in advance. I kind of like that. Like, I had not read that in advance. I kind of like, it's a little tougher if I run across a word I'm not familiar with, or that's tough for me to pronounce on the go. But I like the idea that I'm, especially with something like a twist ending like that, that I'm surprised by the twist at the same time, and I have to adjust to it. I don't know. It's probably not better in the long run than if I actually knew everything in advance. But I like it. And it's fun for me. So anyway, I hope it's still fun to listen to. So there's that, and I think that's gonna do it for the time being. So I think now I have a little bit of the Western from the story. That's going to do it here for now. So see you all again real soon here. I hope. I reckon I will. All right. Very good, people.